Welcome, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to call to order the first main business meeting of the 2026 World Science Fiction Society. My name is Jessie Lipp. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm going to be the presiding officer for this meeting. You will hear folks refer to me as either Mix presiding officer or Mix chairperson. In addition to myself, the officers for this meeting are Martin Pine, he, him, who is our deputy presiding officer and parliamentarian, Ira Alexander, they, them, who's our secretary, and Olav Rockney, he, him, who is our timekeeper, also known, I believe, as the timekeeping robot. Also on our business meeting staff, we have Alana Vincent, who's handling slides and screen share, Kathy Bond, Warren Buff, Chris Hensley, and Chris Snyder, who are moderating the speaker pool, Jed Hartman, who's assisting with the preparation of all of the documentation, Anna Bradley, Gail Turman, and Terry Neal are working the help desk and tech, and Kirk Dingman and Adam Zuber are our Lumi technicians. We can go to the next slide. This meeting is being captioned, and you can turn on the captions by going to More, Captions, Show Captions in Zoom. Next slide. If you're having any issues during the meeting, you can contact our help desk at bmhelp@lacon.org or by using the help desk channel in the Discord. Speaking of which, we have a business meeting Discord. You can join it. So the Zoom chat isn't enabled during the meeting, so any sort of text chat will happen in the business meeting Discord. It will be open from 3 hours prior to the beginning of the session to 3 hours after adjournment, and then will be in read-only mode in between. There is a link to it in the documents section, and I believe also the homepage of the Lumi platform, and also in the business meeting card on the LAcon member portal. Next slide. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. The exception is when we are in executive session. It is being streamed to the LAcon YouTube page and will be posted on the Worldcon events YouTube channel. Related to that, if you want to have your camera on during the meeting, you can do so. And if you're somebody who has bandwidth issues, you can disable incoming video in Zoom so that it is audio only to preserve bandwidth. Let's see. Where am I in my script? Sorry. You can go to the blank slide. Yeah. We use parliamentary procedure, specifically Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised to run our meetings. If you are new to using parliamentary procedure or to the WSFS business meeting, I know that it can be intimidating. My job and the job of all of the business meeting staff is to help guide you through that process so that we can accomplish the business and accomplish the business of the society. And the job of all of us is to use parliamentary procedure wisely. It confers upon all of us both rights and obligations. And one of those obligations is to consider whether a course of action, even if we are entitled to it, is in the best interest of the organization. So I'm just going to ask all of us to work together to get through our business ahead of us. In the Documents tab, there is a parliamentary procedure chart that outlines the different motions you can make and also tells you which speaking category you should choose when submitting a request to speak. The Documents tab also has the full agenda and the current standing rules and constitution. It also has the full agenda and the current standing rules and constitution. So you can access that information there. It does sometimes take a few moments for items in the document tab to load. We can go to the next slide. If you're wishing to speak to an item of business, you'll click the speaker pool tab, and there you will select your purpose for speaking, such as a speech in favor, against, what kind of motion you're making. And then in the text field, you'll enter the item number, such as F.1 or F.1 Jones Amendment. In the All Messages tab, we'll have a posted message that says what the current item of business is to help folks follow along with where we are. If you're selecting the other parliamentary option, you need to include what motion you're wanting to make in that text field. And if you're joining from a multi-member household where you have multiple folks joining the meeting, but only one of you has joined the Zoom, please make sure to put the name of the account that is connected to the Zoom in the text field so we know who to unmute. You can easily see that in your Zoom by opening up the participants list. You'll be at the top. Lastly, if you're submitting a point of order, a parliamentary inquiry, or request for information, it's very helpful if you give a brief explanation of your point or inquiry in that text field. However, not doing so will not prevent you from being recognized. If you are attempting to submit a request to speak for an item that is not yet before the body, in general, please don't do that. It makes it a lot more difficult for us to manage things on the back end when we have lots of requests coming in that aren't regarding what's in front of us. However, if you really need to do so, like if you have a privileged motion that you want to make sure is the first thing addressed regarding an item, please include as much information as you can in your request to speak so that the speaker pool moderators know how to handle it and when it should be brought up. On the flip side, if you are attempting to speak on the item that is currently before us, and you are concerned that I'm going to move on before you can get your request in, you can submit your request with just the item number, and I will see it come in and recognize you accordingly. Especially when we are close to the point of resolving an item of business, I keep a very close eye on the incoming requests to make sure that nothing sneaks by me. So we never want to be in a situation where somebody had something that they wanted to say in debate, had a motion they wanted to make, but I moved on before they were able to get their request in. So you can just submit a request that just says, E.1, wait, and I will see that and we will proceed accordingly and I will make sure that you get recognized. But when you are able to do so, the more information you're able to include about the kind of motion you're wanting to make, the more helpful. Once you have submitted your request to speak, it gets sent to the speaker pool, and our speaker pool moderators will take care of categorizing the request for me to then assign folks to the floor. When I recognize you to speak, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom to allow the LumiTech to easily find you and request that you unmute. You can choose whether or not to have your camera on when you're speaking. When you're speaking, please introduce yourself and give your pronouns. And remember that debate must be civil and it must be germane. That is relevant to the item of business currently before us. We set debate times by the total number of minutes for speeches in favor and against. So if debate time is set at 6 minutes, that means 3 minutes for speeches in favor and 3 minutes for speeches against. And neutral items like a point of order, debate on subsidiary motions comes out from both sides. As we move through the meeting and speakers are recognized and items of business are disposed of, we'll be archiving requests to speak. And when your request has been archived, you'll see a response from the moderator indicating that. If you submit a request and later change your mind, you can select retract a request and use the text field to indicate which request you're retracting. You don't need to retract a request that has already been archived. And in addition, we'll be archiving items that are no longer relevant. So if you want to make a motion to end debate and somebody else does that, we'll take care of archiving the request for you. There's also an option in the request to speak categories for a speaker pool report. Alon, if you go to the next slide, the text of the, oh, sorry. No, keep going. Sorry. There we go. I forgot to say next slide a few times. So this is basically a privileged motion that requests me to report on the contents of the speaker pool, and I will do so. In addition, the slides that are being shared will include a current count. I think you can go to the next slide. Yeah, we'll include a count of the folks in the speaker pool currently, the number of people for, against, and then for other motions such as amendments and refer to committee. And we have fixed the issue that we were having last week, and those should now be accurate. Go to the next slide. Sometimes motions require a second, and we'll be using the raise hand function in the Zoom to second motions. And you can raise your hand as soon as the motion is made, and I'll also ask if there's a second. In the same way, sometimes I ask for unanimous consent of the body to do something rather than needing to take a vote. That will sound like me saying, "Is there any objection to?" If you wish to object, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. When it comes time for a vote, uh, the vote will automatically, you can just kill the screen share for now, Alana. When it comes time to a vote, the vote will automatically appear on your screen and you'll select how you wish to vote. You can change your vote just by clicking the other option, and you can completely cancel your vote by clicking cancel. I generally hold the vote open for about a minute. I'm able to see how many votes are being cast in real time. So the timing of how long I hold the vote open will be adjusted depending on how quickly you all vote. And also if I can see that, 90 people have voted in favor and 3 have voted against, I probably don't need to hold the vote open for any longer. So we are going to go ahead and move to our test vote. And so the question before you is two classic TV shows that both take place in LA. And so we are asking you to vote on the question of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Saved by the Bell. You can go ahead and vote now. I'm going to hold the vote open for 20 more seconds because I just realized that I'm out of Dr. Pepper. So I'm going to go grab one. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 66 for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and 34 for Saved by the Bell, that is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that has it. It is not quite a two-thirds majority, though. Okay. Our first item of business is going to be hearing back from the business meeting study group regarding who they would like to have chair their committee over the next year. Um, so if you are going to be speaking for their, I see it, can we please I will recognize Kat Corbetti.
Thank you very much, Mixed Chair. The study group committee would like to appoint myself and Farah Mendelson as co-chairs. We have had an internal discussion and a poll that was sent out to everyone, and we got a few responses back. So that is the current position. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to take this as a motion from the committee to reconstitute with yourself and Farah as co-chairs. And because that motion comes from the committee, it does not require a second. Is there any objection to reconstituting the business meeting study group with Farah and Kat as co-chairs? So you can raise the hand in Zoom. Okay, seeing no objection, the business meeting study group is reconstituted with Kat and Farah as co-chairs. Our next item of business should be the membership of the committee created by D.5 Bidding Trust and Safety. Unfortunately, I did not have time this week to properly review the volunteers for this committee. My work decided to move into a brand new building this month, and I have been working a lot of long hours as a result. For the record, we had the business meeting dates on the calendar long before the move dates, but apparently we decided that we should like prioritize our clients rather than scheduling needs of one employee out of over 100, which I think was very unfair, but you know. So I'm going to announce the membership of that committee at the next meeting. So our goal for today is to get through the business passed on, except for E14 and E15, which were postponed definitely, not to be taken up before August 1st. And we're also hoping to get started on the new constitutional changes. Um, so according to our rules, during the preliminary business meeting, there are a couple motions that are in order. However, since we were not able to get to substantive debate on these items at the preliminary business meeting, these motions are in order the first time these items come up at the main business meeting. These are the motions to postpone indefinitely and object to consideration. These are normally more relevant for the new constitutional changes. And object to consideration would not be in order for business passed on. But I just wanted to run over these really quickly since we are now in that part of the agenda. So the motion to postpone indefinitely, it drops the current item from the agenda without a direct vote and effectively kills the proposal for this year. It's automatically assigned 4 minutes of debate time and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. The motion to object to consideration, we can go to the next slide, drops the motion from the agenda without a direct vote and without debate. It effectively kills the proposal for this year. It's to be used when even consideration of the motion would be inadvisable, and it is not in order once any debate has occurred, and it requires a 3/4 majority to pass. Okay, so we are going to jump into the business passed on. As a reminder, we set debate times for these at the last meeting. Um, so I will, if we can just briefly get those debate times up on the screen, and you can just cycle through those really quickly, Alana. And then I will also, of course, be letting you know how much debate time we set when we get to each item. Okay, so the item before us is E.1, found on page 25 of your agenda. Debate time for this was set at 2 minutes. So this is E.1, clarifying active bids. If there is anyone wishing to speak to this, you can go ahead and submit a request to do so. Okay, I'm going to recognize Perry Ann Lurie for a speech against E.1.
Unmute. Hey, can you hear me?
We can.
It works. Perry Ann Lurie, she, her. It's not really against, but like happened this year, we have a bid that's on the ballot that has withdrawn. And I don't think that they should have a say in what the voting fee should be. Or whatever this is, I can't remember. But they shouldn't have a say in it if they've officially withdrawn their bid, even after they got on the ballot. They're no longer active.
Thank you. That's a speech against. Let's see. I'm going to recognize Kat Corbetti for a speech in favor of E.1, and then Cliff Dunn for a speech against.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I think this perfectly clarifies that bidding committees that have filed before the ballot deadline are active. Now, if a bidding committee has withdrawn their bid, that would remove them. And if someone wants to put together an amendment, we could do that too. But I think it's self-evident. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's a speech in favor. Going to recognize Cliff Dunn for a speech against. Or sorry, Gray Anderson. I did not realize that your name had changed in the.
Yeah, I asked to switch it from William to Cliff, and they went with my AtCon badge name, Yay Technology. Um, uh, anyhow, I have submitted an amendment to the effect of what was just suggested, but I also think that there should be some provision for if we have a valid write-in that files after the deadline, which Winnipeg would have normally been in 2021 for 2023. They should also have a say here. And there have been some other bids over history. The boat comes to mind.
Okay, so are you wishing to make an amendment? Yeah, we can go ahead and unmute him again. Sorry about that.
Yes, Mixed Chair, I submitted that. Rushing along as we often do, I have filed an amendment in the system.
Okay. I mean, it's in order for you to make your amendment now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you say, if you're wishing to make that amendment, can you tell us what that is that you're wanting to do?
Yes, the amendment would add after filed before the ballot deadline and which have not subsequently withdrawn.
Okay. So the motion is to amend E.1 to insert and which have not subsequently withdrawn after before the ballot deadline. I do see several seconds. Thank you. So, like I said, the motion is to insert an E.1 and which have not subsequently withdrawn after filed before the ballot deadline, so that the motion in whole would read unanimous agreement of the current Worldcon committee and all bidding committees that have filed before the ballot deadline and which have not subsequently withdrawn. So, because this is an amendment to a item that is up for ratification, it requires a two-thirds vote of the body to choose to even consider this amendment, which is functionally a motion to suspend the rules. So that motion to suspend the rules and consider this amendment is neither debatable nor amendable. So if we can go ahead and open up a vote on whether to consider the E.1 amendment. I know it's going to take Adam a hot second to get that put together. But this will be a vote on whether to consider the amendment to E.1 and will require a two-thirds majority.
May I note that we have run out of time for debate against.
Thank you, Olaf. We can go ahead and close the vote. Okay. With 86 in favor and 12 against, that is a two-thirds majority. And so we will consider the amendment. So I have a couple of high priority items. So I have one that is about the wording of the amendment, that it should be that Cliff said that instead of which. I would consider that an editorial change. So, or sorry, we'll get it fixed. If you all want to debate grammatically whether or not that or which is more accurate, that would be an editorial change and in the purview of the secretary. And so we're not going to get stuck on that. Um, I have another uh, parliamentary inquiry that I'm sure you all are expecting, which is a question of whether this would be a greater or a lesser change. So to clarify for those who are not used to our process, so constitutional changes have to be passed by two consecutive business meetings. So these were items that were passed at Seattle in 2025 and are now up for ratification. And if they are ratified, will be added to the Constitution at the end of this year. We can make amendments to these items. However, doing so generally resets the clock on ratification, and this year would be considered first passage, and it would go to the next year to be considered for second passage. The exception is that if the amendment is considered to be a lesser change, which generally means that the amendment makes a change that uh, brings the wording of the text closer to what was in the Constitution before. If it is a lesser change, then it does not reset the clock on ratification. And so that's why we are being asked about this. So give me a second to think. One moment. I'm going to confer with my parliamentarian because I'm a little torn on this. Okay, there we go. Okay, so after conferring with the parliamentarian, so this one's a little bit weird. And if you all try to do things to some of the subsequent ones, they might get weird too, because the intent of sort of the things in the clarifying section is largely to not necessarily change the meaning, but just clarify what the existing meaning is. So that can make it a little bit difficult to determine whether something's a greater or a lesser change. However, and I want to be clear, I don't rule on hypotheticals. The amendment has not passed, and therefore this is still a hypothetical change. Um, I answer parliamentary inquiries at this point. For those not familiar with our process, what that means is if I make a ruling on whether or not something is a greater or lesser change, the body can choose to appeal the ruling of the chair and can decide that they disagree with me on whether or not something is a greater or lesser change, and that requires a majority vote. So if I say that something's a greater change, that can be appealed. You all can choose that it's a lesser change, and then it's a lesser change. However, I don't rule on hypotheticals because we don't want to be spending time actually debating and voting and getting into the procedural tangle for an amendment that may not even pass, right? So I will answer parliamentary inquiries about what I think I would rule, but I will not make an actual ruling on whether something is a greater or lesser change until the amendment actually passes, if it passes. So, to answer the parliamentary inquiry from Chris R. about whether or not this is a greater or lesser change, my inclination is that it is a greater change because the original text just says all active bids with no limiting language on what defines that. And so a amendment that adds bids to what is considered active bids brings it closer in line with the current Constitution. This amendment reduces the number of bids or the kind of bids that could be considered active bids, and therefore it is further away from the language in the current Constitution. So that is my answer to that parliamentary inquiry. Okay. So we are on the amendment to E.1 to insert and that have not subsequently withdrawn after ballot deadline. Generally, amendments are automatically given 5 minutes. However, because we have less than 5 minutes of debate time, I am going to suggest that we give this amendment a total of 2 minutes of debate time, not to be taken out of the debate time on the underlying item. Is there any objection to setting a total of 2 minutes of debate time for this amendment? If so, you can raise the hand in Zoom. Okay, I don't see anyone objecting, so debate time will be set at 2 minutes. I am also seeing that I don't believe, so the current speaker pool counts are showing for the E.1. We do not have anybody in the speaker pool actually for the amendment, I believe. Okay, so I am still not seeing anyone wishing to speak on the amendment. I do have a parliamentary inquiry from Kayla Allen of if we already voted on the first order amendment. We did not vote on the first order amendment. What we voted on was whether we should consider the amendment because this is a amendment to an item up for ratification and therefore requires a 2/3 vote of the body to consider. We have not voted on the amendment itself. Okay, I do see a speech in favor of the amendment, so I'm going to recognize Dave Wallace for that.
Yes, unmute for him. Okay. Dave Wallace, he, him. And yes, I think the amendment is well taken. And the question of the greater or lesser change, I will note that I think it's a lesser change in terms of the spirit of the wording, perhaps a greater change in terms of the technical, whether you've added or subtracted words from the original wording of the Constitution. But in any case, I believe that all active bids, which is currently in the Constitution, would not include those that have withdrawn. So I think we should pass this and then get to the question of the greater or lesser change.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of the amendment. Still don't see anyone wishing to speak against. Going to give you all just a little bit more time to see if there's anyone wishing to speak to the amendment. Okay. Okay, I do see, I'm going to recognize Linda Deneroff for a speech against the amendment.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little confused about when you say the amendment, but what concerns me about the addition of this language is that if a bid withdraws, as Nuremberg did the day before the ballot goes live, it is too late to change any voting fees. I think this is ill-considered. There should be some sort of deadline or that phrase should be withdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that was a speech against. I'm going to just clarify the language that I try to use because we have 100% gotten into situations before where we're talking about amendments and it's not clear what we're referring to. So I'm not going to claim I'm perfect on this, but my attempt is to always refer to the item in our agenda, which, yes, does amend our Constitution, as either an item up for ratification or business passed on, or when we get to them, do constitutional changes. If I speak about the amendment, I am referring to a motion to amend the text in front of us. So right now we are on an amendment to E.1, which is to add, and that have not subsequently withdrawn after filed before the ballot deadline. Okay, I'm going to recognize Perrianne Lurie for a speech in favor of the amendment.
Still Perrianne Lurie, she, her. It's my fault, Linda. It's not about voting fees. It's about what electronic signature means are used for the ballot. And so therefore, it doesn't affect that. And I'm in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of the amendment. I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a speech in favor of the amendment.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Very simply put, if a bid withdraws, there's a practical concern that they might in turn be unreachable, and so any sort of unanimous consent might be undoable. And also, if they pull out, that's just one less signature you have to gather. Their non-objection becomes irrelevant. And I'll just also advise the body that I have pre-filed an appeal if this is ruled a greater change. That I do think this should be considered a lesser change. Thank you.
We are out of time for speeches in favor of the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Olaf, please mute yourself in the Discord voice chat as well, because I just got two of you in my ear. And I'm going to recognize RGB for a speech against the amendment to E.1.
So, hello, RGB or Gail Turman, she, they. As somebody who is often working on the side of this that is implementing things, I will say that any late changes, like if there's like a consensus and then someone withdraws and they're like, actually, we're changing everything the day before the deadline, like that's not reasonable. So, I think that I don't know what to do with this, but at some point you make a consensus and it sort of has to stay the same because we have to implement it. And I don't think that changing anything is the way to go here.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against the amendment. I do see a hand raised in chat, though I'm not sure what that is regarding. I'm going to recognize, or no, we are out of time for speeches in favor of the amendment, right? Olaf, you said that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to recognize Joe Van really quickly to see if this is a high priority item that just hasn't been. Oh, it is a speech against. There we go. Joe Van.
Yep, sorry.
All right, you're good.
Okay. Speaking as the bid that was left when someone withdrew, look, we're going to be paying taxes on these WSFS memberships. And so ideally we would have loved to have raised the amount, but honestly, I don't feel that that's acceptable to do. Once we've announced, we should keep it how it is.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against the amendment. So according to our rules, debate does need to be germane. And so I am just going to clarify that E.1 specifically references the part of the Constitution about bids choosing to offer electronic signatures. that are legal in the ceded Worldcon's home jurisdiction. And so that is what the text of the amendment is referencing. And so debate regarding this item should be constrained to that question. Okay, I do not see anybody else wishing to speak to the E.1 amendment. And I'm guessing that we have barely any, if any, time remaining for speeches against. So I'm going to
Correct.
give you all, yeah, I'm going to give you all just a little bit of time to see if there's anybody wishing to make some sort of motion regarding the E.1 amendment. Okay, seeing none. So the item ahead of us, in front of us, that we will be voting on is the amendment to E.1 to insert and that have not subsequently withdrawn after filed before the ballot deadline, so that should it pass, E.1 will read in whole, striking agreement of all active bids and inserting unanimous agreement of the current Worldcon committee and all bidding committees that have filed before the ballot deadline and that have not subsequently withdrawn. So that is the question in front of us, and we can go ahead and open the vote on whether to adopt the E.1 amendment. So we'll require a majority vote. We can go ahead and close the vote. With 72 in favor and 25 against, the amendment does pass. And so what is before us is E.1 as amended to insert, or E.1 as amended, so it now has that and that have not subsequently withdrawn language. So, like I said, the next order of business is for me to rule on whether or not this is a greater or lesser change. I am going to rule that this is a greater change because the original language in the Constitution does not provide any constraints on what is an active bid, and this adds more constraints to what is considered an active bid and therefore is further away from the language in the Constitution. I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for an appeal of my ruling. And so just to clarify again, since it's been a little bit, if an amendment to business passed on is considered a greater change, it resets the ratification clock. And so this would be the first year passed, and then next year it would be up for its second vote. If it is ruled a lesser change, it does not reset the ratification clock, and passage this year would bring it into the Constitution as amended. Um, so I believe I said I was going to recognize Gray Anderson for an appeal.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I wish to appeal the decision that this is a greater change. I believe this is a lesser change.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Okay, I do see several seconds. Thank you. Okay, so the ruling of the chair has been appealed. So the way appeals work, and I believe I forgot to add this slide. So I'm just going to talk us through it without a slide. Sorry about that. So the way appeals work is that the question in front of you is whether to sustain the ruling of the chair. So being in favor means that you are in favor of sustaining the ruling of the chair, that you agree with me. If you are against, it means that you are not in favor of sustaining the ruling of the chair. That is, you don't agree with me. Okay. I'm going to, one moment, I do see a hand in the Zoom. I don't see any high priority items. Okay. I'm going to recommend a total debate time of 2 minutes for this appeal. Is there any objection to 2 total minutes of debate time for the appeal? I don't see any. So debate time is set at 2 minutes. So generally, the chair gets to speak first about their ruling. I have already explained my ruling, so I don't feel the need to go into that further. And so I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson again for a speech against sustaining the ruling of the chair.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Long story short, I think this moves us closer to what would be prevailing practice, that if a bid had withdrawn, it would no longer have been considered active by the existing Worldcon committee, and so therefore this is a lesser change. And I've also filed a point of privilege. I would like to ask that when the vote is up online, if it could be indicated as sustain or overturn or something similar, just because people do occasionally get this one sincerely backwards.
Okay, I believe that's regarding. Okay, yeah, I believe you're clarifying what the text of the actual vote should say. We will make sure that what Adam puts up as the vote is clear. The actual button that you will click is sort of pre-locked in. But we will make sure that the text of the motion that is voted on is clear what in favor and against do. Okay, that was a speech against sustaining the ruling of the chair. I'm going to recognize Ron Oakes for a speech in favor of sustaining the ruling of the chair.
Yes, I believe that taking this on strictly constitutional grounds, which is the rules that Mixed Chair has to abide by, Ron Oak, see him, by the way, you need to follow the strictly constitutional rules when you are following parliamentary procedure. And the strict constitutional reading of this says that we are tightening the rules from all active bids to the bidding committees that have filed. Now it's the bidding committees that have filed and not subsequently redone. We are narrowing the scope, and this further narrows the scope to the bids that that have have not withdrawn. That is, maybe you could argue it's clarifying, but from a strict wording perspective, I believe it is further narrowing, which is a greater change.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of the ruling of the chair. I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen for a speech against sustaining my ruling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kayla Allen, she, her. Technically, what we're talking about is does the amendment, or does it increase the scope, or does it not increase the scope? Not increasing the scope is not the same thing as reducing it. I believe that this amendment brings us closer to what I think a common sense wording or agreement of active bids would be. No sensible administrator would consider a withdrawn bid to be active.
We are out of time.
Okay, thank you.
The chair's ruling. Thank you.
Okay, so we're out of time for speeches against the chair's ruling. Are we also out of time for speeches? Excuse me.
We are.
In favor? Okay, so we are out of time for debate on the appeal. It is my prerogative as the chair to speak in favor of my ruling once more at the close of debate. My general understanding is Similar to what Ron Oak said, we may all have our personal understandings of what active bids means, but without language in the Constitution currently to specify what that language means, I have to go by a strict understanding and interpretation. And strictly speaking, this amendment adds more restrictions to what was previously language that did not specify any restrictions. And therefore, by further increasing the number of restrictions, it is moving further away from the meaning under the current Constitution as, like I said, we can all have our personal opinions, but a strict understanding of the meaning under the Constitution, it's moving further away and therefore would be a greater change. Okay, so we are going to move to a vote on the appeal of the ruling of the chair. This will require a majority vote. So the question before you is whether are you in favor of sustaining the ruling of the chair? So if you are in favor of sustaining the ruling of the chair, that means you agree with the ruling of the chair that this is a greater change to the Constitution and therefore resets the ratification clock. If you are against sustaining the ruling of the chair, it means that you disagree with my ruling and that it is a lesser change and does not reset the ratification clock. So the phrasing of the question in front of us is, are you in favor of sustaining the ruling of the chair? And we can go ahead and open the vote. I'm going to leave the vote open for 30 more seconds. I always forget how long 30 seconds is. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 49 in favor and 54 against, the ruling of the chair is not sustained. And so E.1, the amendment to E.1 is considered a lesser change. And should E.1 pass ratification, it will not reset the ratification clock, and the amended language will be added to the Constitution at the close of this year's Worldcon. Okay. So we are back to the item in front of us is E.1 as amended. I believe we should still have time on the underlying motion. And I am going to, let's see, where were we? We had a speech against, and then we had a speech in favor, I think, and then we had the amendments. I believe we are at a speech in favor. Enough things have happened that it's not going to break the world if I'm not alternating perfectly. So
that is correct. You're correct.
Great. I love being correct. We are going to, oh, I do have a hand from my timekeeper.
We are out of time for speeches against.
Okay. Okay, but we do still have time for speeches in favor. So I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen for a speech in favor of E.1.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. The reason for this proposal that came out of the nitpicking and flyspecking committee was it occurred to us that the actual wording could allow pernicious and mischievous actions such as filing a bid just before the election closed at the convention and then announcing that they disagreed with the agreement to allow electronic voting. That's all it is about, and I think this is therefore a good choice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.1, and we are out of time for speeches against, and I do not see any further speeches in favor of E.1 or any further items. Going to give you all just a little bit of time to see if there's something that needs to come in. Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote on the adoption of E.1 as amended, and we can go ahead and open the vote. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 91 in favor and 8 against, E.1 as amended passes and will be added to the Constitution at the close of LAcon 2. Okay, I hope we all have our parliamentary muscles warmed up now. And I do have a reminder to me, and I'm sorry for not specifying this earlier when I was talking us through the agenda. We did also postpone definitely at the previous meeting F dot, I remember the name of it, I don't remember the number, F.8, which is purposeful proportionality, to be taken up no later than 11:45 a.m. Pacific today. So that is also something that is going to come up today. And I'm setting an alarm on my clock to remind me. Okay, so the next item in front of us is E.2, clarifying Hugo Award administrators' discretion, which is on page 29. We have set debate time at 2 minutes. And if there is anyone wishing to speak to E.2, they can submit a request to do so. Okay, I'm going to recognize Jed Hartman for a speech in favor of E.2.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Jed Hartman, he, him. I believe I'm the one who suggested this change to the Nitpicking and Flyspecking Committee, and I suggested it because the 2023 Hugo Administrator claimed at one point that this section of the Constitution allowed him to make any decisions he wanted about eligibility. So I think it's worth clarifying the scope of this section.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.2. Don't have anybody else wishing to speak to E.2. I'm going to give you all just a few seconds. Oh, I do see that something comes in. Okay, so I have a... Okay, so I have a motion for an amendment. However, I'm actually going to take it as a parliamentary inquiry because what I have is something about it saying the Hugo Administrator instead of the Worldcon Committee. We have already passed D dot something, D dot 3, which, nope, not D dot 3, D dot 1, sorry, which instructed the secretary to clean up a lot of language regarding places where it says the Worldcon Committee, but we have now required that authority be delegated to a Hugo Award subcommittee, and 3.8.2, which is what E.2 references, is already in that instruction. So that is already handled with D.1. I'm going to recognize Laura Miller for a parliamentary inquiry, I believe.
Hi, Laura Miller, she, her, and yeah, I just had a question about that exact change. If, in light of the fact that we passed D.1, if we could do something to make that be a part of this, a part of this change. But I think you've already clarified that. So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
sure.
so D.1, yeah, just to say it again. So yeah, and as Alana is showing on the screen, so D.1 already instructs the secretary to change Worldcon committee to Hugo Awards subcommittee. These are considered editorial changes or revisions by the secretary to sort of bring the Constitution in compliance with itself. And so we did not try to go through all of these and make that adjustment to these items pending ratification. I think a couple of them got notes, but not all of them did. But if the text of these items refer to the World Cognitive Committee or something like that, when it should say the Hugo Award Subcommittee, that will be taken care of. You don't need to worry about submitting amendments to clarify or change that because we've already instructed the secretary to take care of those items. Okay, I don't see anybody else wishing to speak to D.2, and I believe you have had enough time to submit a request if you have something. And so we are going to go ahead and move to a vote on whether to adopt E.2. So we can go ahead and open the vote. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote with 95 in favor and 2 against. E.2 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of LAcon. Okay, our next item is E.3, clarifying best graphic story or comic. I'm going to, oh, nope, we have set debate time at 2 minutes. That's what I'm going to say. And now I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor.
Oops. Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. I hope this will not be as controversial as some of the other amendments we've discussed so far have been. This is quite simply to recognise the way in which fans actually consume graphic novels and comics, and it's to make sure that there's no ambiguity about the practice that recent Hugo Award administrators have used in terms of recognising this. The fact is that the rules currently, as written, might have given some doubt as to whether compilations of comic issues published in a particular year were eligible if the comic issues themselves have been published in previous years. We want to take that away and to make sure that when people vote for something, they know that it's quite likely to be accepted as eligible and should therefore end up on the ballot. And basically, we just want the ballot to reflect fans' preferences more solidly than well, to guarantee that the ballot reflects fans' preferences more solidly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We are out of time for speeches in favor regarding E.3. I do not see anybody else wishing to speak to E.3. Nope, I see something that just came in. Okay, so I have a privileged question about voting. So I want to specify again. So I can see the results of the votes as they come in. So when we have a vote that is hugely lopsided and the number of people remaining who have left to vote could not change the results of the vote, I will go ahead and close the vote more quickly. When the results of the vote are close or people aren't voting very quickly, I will specify how much time I am adding, I will try to specify sort of how long the vote will be held open. But I'm not going to generally announce a 5-second warning for closing the vote on every vote, especially those items where the will of the body is very clear and there's no, the vote's not going to change. So that is how I have been doing all of the votes, and that is how we are going to continue to move forward in the interests of the time of the body, while also maintaining the will of the membership. Okay, we don't have anybody else wishing to speak to E.3, and so we will go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of E.3. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 92 in favor and 4 against, E.3 passes. So we are now going to move to E.4, clarifying best series, which is on page 30 of your agenda. Debate time for this item has been set at 2 minutes. If there's anyone wishing to speak to E.4, they can submit a request to do so. Okay, I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Again, I don't want to take up the meeting's time with this. This was passed by a very large majority last year. Essentially, we simply want to ensure that practice and that the preferences of voters are properly encoded into the Constitution, that if a series qualifies as best series, that doesn't prevent elements of the series for qualifying in other categories, unless the maker of the unless the creator themselves wants to decline those nominations. It's pretty straightforward, so I hope people will pass it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.4. I don't yet see anybody else wishing to speak to E.4. Give you a moment. And I'm going to assume that Nicholas White is going to want to be recognized for E.5. So just FYI, Nicholas, I'll recognize you on that one when we get there. Okay, I think I do see something that has come in. Okay, I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a speech against E.4.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I'll be brief, but to at least a passing read, it certainly looks like 3353 negates 3352. And that feels confusing. I suspect the intent is that the question for 3352 is if an entire series had appeared in, say, best novel, but it looks like the two are contradictory.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against. Okay, I'm going to recognize Tammy Coxon for a speech in favor. And then if we still have time, I will recognize Farah for a speech in favor of E.4.
Hello, Tammy Coxon, she, her. Just to respond to Cliff, it is only in the instance that there is a series and a subset series. So 2 series eligible in series is what's accounted for in 3.3.5.2. The second has to do with a separate work, such as a novel or short story or novella, still being eligible in its individual category and not discounting the series. So series and subset series, series and something else, 2 different things.
That is time.
Okay, we are out of time for speeches in favor of E.4. I do not see anybody wishing to speak against E.4. Could I just give you all a little bit of time because there's been some other things. Okay. It looks like we are ready to vote on E.4. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of E.4. We can go ahead and close the vote. With, where is it? There we go. 95 in favor and 3 against. E.4 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of the current Worldcon. We're going to move to E.5, clarifying the best dramatic presentation categories, which is on page 30 of the agenda. Debate time has been set at 2 minutes, and I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Again, this is simply an amendment that codifies existing practice in a way that I think voters both here and in the Hugo Awards will agree is practical. It's simply that a series should not qualify for the ballot at the same time as one or two of its episodes qualify for best dramatic presentation short form, or vice versa, and it gives administrators guidance as to what decisions to make in a situation where that seems to be likely. This doesn't run against anything that has been done previously as far as we're aware, so I hope that people will support it. It offers simple clarity and guidance to future Hugo administrators.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.5. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak to E.5 yet. I'm going to give you all a little bit of time to see if there is anything. Okay, so I don't see anybody else wishing to speak to E.5. We will move to a vote. So we can open the vote on the adoption of E.5. I was muted. We can go ahead and close the vote. With 90 in favor and 9 against, the E.5 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this year's Worldcon. Okay, we are going to move to E.6, clarifying nominee diversity. This is on page 31 of your agenda, and debate time has been set at 2 minutes. I'm going to recognize Nicholas White again for a speech in favor.
Thank you very much, Mixed Chairperson. Again, this is very simply to codify existing practice in the rules. Nominee diversity was passed at the same time as the EPH counting system, and the way in which it was put into the Constitution isn't actually completely compatible with the way in which the EPH system works. This quite simply tries to bring the two of them together, and at the same time takes account of the possibility of withdrawals or of disqualifications. It's proposed by myself and Tammy Coxon, who have administered most of the Hugo Awards of the last 10 years. So I hope that people will support it as a helpful guidance to future Hugo administrators. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.6. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak on E.6. I'm going to give you all 10-15 seconds to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak to E.6. There we go. Okay, nobody else is wishing to speak to E.6, so we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of E.6. We can go ahead and close the vote. With 95 in favor and 2 against, E.6 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this year's Worldcon. Okay, that brings us to E.7, clarifying WSFS membership rights A, which is on page 32. As a reminder for anybody else who's just wondering or confused about the titles of E.7 and E.8, so this was originally presented as one item, and then I believe was like referred to committee, and the committee came back basically recommending dividing the question into 2 separate amendments. And so that's why we have sort of 2 amendments that are referred to as A and B. So E.7, clarifying WSFS membership rights A, we have set debate time on this at 4 minutes. If there's anybody wishing to speak to it, I'm going to recognize Kat Corbetti for, I believe, a speech in favor.
Yes, mixed chair, thank you. I was the original proponent of this motion. This part, the E.7, just seeks to put everything in one place that was kind of scattered all over the Constitution as to what the rights of WSFS members are. So with this, it's just made clear to anyone just glancing at the Constitution what one can do with a WSFS membership. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.7. We don't yet have anybody else wishing to speak to E.7, so I'm going to give you all some time to see if there's anybody wishing to speak to it. Okay, I still don't see anybody else wishing to speak to E.7, so we can go ahead and move to a vote. And we can open the vote on the adoption of E.7. Go ahead and close the vote. With 94 in favor and 5 against, E.7 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this Worldcon. That brings us to E.8, clarifying WSFS membership rights B. This is also on page 32 of your agenda, and debate time for this item has been set at 6 minutes. And I'm going to recognize Kat Corbetti again for a speech in favor.
Thank you, mixed chair. Kat Corbetti, she, her. So this was the controversial part of my original motion, which would recognize WSFS members as a whole as stakeholders in this business meeting. This would attach attendance of virtual business meetings like this one to the WSFS membership. That would make people who don't yet have an attending membership able to come here and vote on the issues before us. I think this increases accessibility of the business meeting. It opens up the community to see, it enables people to see how this governance is conducted, and it just allows people to have a say in Worldcon matters. So I think it's very important that we pass this so that we make the business meeting more accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak against yet. And so, wait, nope, I do. I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen for a speech against, and then I'm going to recognize Laura Miller for a speech in favor.
Thank you, mixed chair. Kayla Allen, she, her. I believe we've thrown it away. We've decided that everything has to be online. I honestly believe that if the attending members of Worldcon, who were until last year the only people who could participate in the business meeting, want to give away the right to all the other members, they should have an opportunity to do that in person. I'm not going to win this, but I think we are setting ourselves up for a real disappointment. And furthermore, I somewhat wonder if there's any point in even having things pass in 2 consecutive years, because after all we need is just people to vote and just do what that is. Thank you.
Okay, that was a speech against E.8. I'm going to recognize Laura Miller for a speech in favor of E.8, and then Gray Anderson for a speech against.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Laura Miller, she, her, and I want to say that I think we really need to, for the good of the society, we need to actually encourage as much participation as we possibly can. I am someone who has been involved with Worldcon since LAcon in 2014. I have been a virtual member every year since 2021. And Worldcon and Hugo's are very important to me. And these past 2 business meetings, this one and the previous year, are the first time I've been able to have a direct say. And I just think that, and I didn't have a virtual membership in 2020 because it was happening on the other side of the planet, and I didn't see a point in becoming a virtual member at that point, since everything was happening while I was asleep. But, and of course, I would go ahead and get a virtual membership if it was necessary to participate in this meeting. However, if somebody, for whatever reason, does not, want to attend virtually, I think they should still be able to, and pay for that additional expense, that they should still be able to participate in this meeting. I think we should encourage everyone who has an interest in having a voice here. We should absolutely allow that to happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.8. I'm recognizing Gray Anderson for a speech against, and then I will recognize Chris Rose for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I would be all in favor of this if it were to say persons holding a virtual membership, but the fact of the matter is that the virtual business meeting is not cheap to put on. You're looking at, I believe, somewhere in the ballpark of $20,000 to $30,000 a year. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to say that this should extend to persons holding a virtual membership rather than just holding any membership. And I don't think it's unreasonable to be concerned about disruptive actors swooping in. WSFS has seen that in the recent past with the puppies. But bottom line, virtual members should be able to attend an online meeting, but persons only holding a quote-unquote WSFS membership, I disagree there.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against E.8. And I believe I said I was recognizing Joe Van for a speech in favor. Olav, can we get a quick time check?
We have 40 seconds remaining for speeches in favor. We have 1 minute and 20 seconds remaining for speeches against.
I have been reminded by my staff that I said I was recognizing Chris Rose. That's what I meant to say. I was just, my eyes were on Joe Van's name, so I did that thing where I said the words that I was reading rather than the words I meant to say. My apologies. So I'm going to recognize Chris Rose for a speech in favor, and then I am going to recognize RKOV for a speech against.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Chris Rose, he, him. I speak in favor because I believe that if you're a WSFS member, you are entitled to participate in the setting of the business and rules of WSFS. If WSFS membership isn't permitted to do everything, what even is a WSFS membership? Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor. So I am recognizing RKOV for a speech against.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. Rick Kowalczyk, he, him. Sorry, my name is wrong online. I have to say I agree with much of what, Gray Anderson, Cliff Dunn said. We have to be concerned about bad actors. And I think that requiring people to have a virtual membership to participate in the WSFS business meeting is a fairly low bar, and it does cost a lot to put on the online business meeting. I might be in favor of saying something like, if there wasn't a if the business meeting wasn't going to be online, then people with WSFS memberships who were near the convention could attend only the WSFS business meeting, but I am not making that amendment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I appreciate you not trying to make that amendment at this time. Okay, so that was a speech against E.8. We do have a motion to extend debate, so I'm going to recognize Gary Blogg for that.
Just extend debate 5 minutes.
So 5 minutes to be divided equally among each side?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is to extend debate by 5 minutes to be divided equally among each side. Is there a second? I do see a second. Okay, you all can see the counts of the speaker pool on the screen, but just to clarify, because I believe one of those, yeah, so we currently have, I believe, 2 people wishing to speak against, because one of those was retracted, and 7 people wishing to speak in favor, because I think one of those was retracted. And nobody else in the pool. The other item you see was the motion to extend debate. Okay, so a motion to extend debate requires a 2/3 vote. And so we will go ahead. Well, actually, let me do this first. Is there any objection to its extending debate by 5 minutes to be divided equally among each side? If there is, please raise the hand. Okay, I do see several hands. I thought so, but just want to make sure. Okay, so we can go ahead and open the vote on whether or not to extend debate by 5 minutes. This will require a 2/3 majority in order to pass. Okay, this is quite close. I'm going to hold the vote for another 15 seconds. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 37 in favor and 73 against, that is only 66.36%. Oh, wait, no, sorry, I was flipping it in my head. It wasn't close at all. I was looking at the against number as the in favor number. Sorry. It doesn't pass with 37 in favor and 73 against. My apologies, y'all. I got too caught up on the fact that the numbers were close to the percentages and didn't notice which side the percentages were on. Okay, the motion to to extend debate does not pass. Olav, can you give us a time check on what we have remaining?
We have 25 seconds remaining for speeches in favor. We have 40 seconds remaining for speeches against.
Okay, thank you. Somebody want to remind me if the last thing we had was a speech against or a speech in favor?
It was a speech against.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to recognize Simon Bubb for a speech in favor, and then I will recognize Jerry Sullivan for a speech against.
Hello, yes, I should just say I'm somebody who has been voting since, I think, LACon and WSFS member for most of those, although I think I've been to 3 Worldcons in person. I'm exactly one of the people who's affected here, and having a right as a WSFS member to attend the business meeting is a big deal. As somebody who can know, this is the first time I've managed to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor. I'm going to recognize Jerry Sullivan for a speech against, and then I will recognize Alan Fleming for a speech in favor.
Sorry, Jerry Sullivan, she, her. I tried unmuting, but it took a while to get permission.
You're good.
Okay, so I am very sympathetic to the people who find this very important, and the newcomers among us. That's great. I also want to point out this is the second year that we've done virtual meetings. We have, it looks like 130 participants at this meeting. We have a low number of people voting, and that does leave us very vulnerable to the bad actors, and making it be a low cost for people is, I do not believe, in the interest of the society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against. I'm going to recognize Alan Fleming for a speech in favor, and then Fred for a speech against.
Alan Fleming, he, him. The cost of virtual participation was raised. I think it's a particularly valid point that 1.5% of the convention's turnover.
Okay, we are out of time for speeches in favor. And how much time do we have remaining for against, Olav?
10 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Fred for those 10 seconds.
Thank you, Fred Bauer, he, him. It not only costs money to put on the business meeting, it also costs money to put on a Worldcon itself. And I don't think we should allow people to just join and vote and then have say in how it's run.
Okay, we are out of time for debate on this item. Going to give you all just a little bit to see if there are any additional motions that come in that we need to address. Although if you had a point of order or parliamentary inquiry, I would have hoped you'd have done so before now. Okay. I do not see anybody else who has any item regarding E.8, and so we will move to a vote. And so we can open a vote on the adoption of E.8. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 82 in favor and 23 against, E.8 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this Worldcon. Okay, we are now going to move to E.9, Hugo Award Software Source, which is on page 34 of the agenda. Debate time on this item has been set at 4 minutes. If there's anybody wishing to speak to this item, they can submit a request to do so. Not seeing anybody wishing to speak. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm going to recognize Chris Rose for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'll be brief. These are my proposals. I believe that the software in service of the community in WSFS should be opened for all WSFS members to inspect. This formalizes the requirement in a way that is relatively future-proof but doesn't impose excessive restrictions on Worldcons. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.9. I don't see anybody else wishing to speak. Let me give you all 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, I don't see anybody else wishing to speak to E.9, and so we will move to a vote. So we can open the vote on the adoption of E.9. You can go ahead and close the vote. With 92 in favor and 7 against, E.9 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this Worldcon. That brings us to E.10, Site Selection Concordance, which is also on page 34 of your agenda. Debate time on this item has been set at 4 minutes. I'm going to assume that Chris Rose wants to speak in favor of it, and so if you do, you can just pop the hand up and I'll recognize you. And anybody else? Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak can do so, and I'll recognize Chris Rose for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. This is a separate amendment to the other software because we believe that site selection software has special requirements that requires the support of the bidding parties, as we debated in one of the earlier adopted amendments as well. I may have lost a microphone setting. Let me know if I disappear.
You're good. Well, we can hear you.
With the other folks on the software committee that originally proposed these, we believe that this was the right balance to strike for this purpose, and I recommend that the body adopt it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.10. I am going to recognize Farah for based on what you've submitted, I think this will basically be a speech against, but I'm going to recognize Farah.
Farah Mendelssohn Day. It's not a speech against, it's just a question, because it may provoke an amendment. What provisions do you have if unanimity can't be achieved?
Okay. So I believe, so this is a request for information about what will happen if unanimity cannot be achieved. So requests for information are directed to the chair. So the current state of our Constitution is that electronic voting in site selection is not required. It can only be done with the agreement of all of, I'm going to say, active bids. We're not going to relitigate E.1 though. It can only be done with the agreement of all of the active bids. And so if unanimity on the software to be used in voting for site selection cannot be achieved, then functionally unanimity on electronic voting in site selection also cannot be achieved. And therefore, there would not be electronic voting in site selection. I do have a privileged request about when our bio break will be. So per the agenda, the bio break will be at roughly 10:45 a.m. Pacific. So my intention was to do it after E.11. We'll see how long E.10 takes. It'll either be after E.10 or E.11. Okay. I have a parliamentary inquiry from Perry and Lurie about if the previous change to the definition of active bids applies here as well. So the language in E.1 was specifically to section 442. This E.10 is referencing section 4.4.3. The language in 4.4 in E.10 was designed to try to match, if I remember correctly, the language in E.1. However, we have now changed the language in E.1. So what I'm going to ask is if there is, so as a reminder, what we did in E.1 was after filed before the ballot deadline, we added and that have not subsequently withdrawn. I'm going to ask the body if there is any objection to amending E.10 to add corresponding language and that have not subsequently withdrawn after filed before the ballot deadline. If there is any objection, please raise the hand in Zoom. So to clarify, this would be an amendment to E10 to bring the language into line with the language in E.1. I do not see any objection, and so this functions as both the 2/3 vote to take up the amendment and passing the amendment itself. While I may philosophically still not agree about greater or lesser changes, I'm going to take the decision of the body on E.1 and rule this a lesser change and therefore not resetting the ratification clock. So what is in front of us is E.10 as amended to bring the wording into line with the same change that was made to E.1, adding and that have not subsequently withdrawn after filed before the ballot deadline. Okay. I believe that addresses all of the items that people have brought forward. I'm going to give you all just a little bit of time since we did some parliamentary shenanigans there to see if there's anything else that people want to bring up. Okay, I don't see any, so we'll move to a vote on E.10. So we can open the vote on whether to adopt E.10 as amended. And we can go ahead and close the vote. With 87 in favor and 2 against, E.10 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this Worldcon. Okay, we are at 10:43 Pacific. Oh, I do have a parliamentary inquiry. I have a parliamentary inquiry about what rule requires a 2/3 vote to amend the ratification of constitutional proposals. Martin and I are gonna race on finding where exactly that is.
It is Standing Rule 5.4.
Martin wins. Standing Rule 5.4 says that motions to amend a constitutional amendment awaiting ratification, that is business passed on, must be submitted in advance of the new business deadline, and that this rule can be suspended by a 2/3 vote. So when amendments are brought to the floor and were not submitted ahead of time, then we need a 2/3 vote in order to suspend the rules and consider it. And making the amendment functions as that. Okay, we are at 12:45. Well, 10:44. Sorry, I'm not on the West Coast. And I forget that I need to pretend to be. Like the person in me that likes things neat and tidy really wanted to get to E.11 before the bio break just because that was in one batch of times, but that's a silly reason to delay the bio break. So we are going to go ahead and take our bio break now. And so we will reconvene at the hour, which will be 11 a.m. Pacific. Okay, we are at 11 a.m. Pacific. And so we will get back into things. I'm going to give Alana just a moment to restart the screen share, I think. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome back. I'm calling us back from recess. Just gonna, for anybody who's like away from their computer, I'm just gonna say once more that we are reconvening the meeting. Okay, so that brings us on to E.11, mandated Hugo Award admin reports, which is on page 35 of the agenda, and debate time on this item has been set at 4 minutes. And so if there's anyone wishing to speak to E.11, they can do so. I do not see anyone wishing to speak yet. There we go. And I will recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor of E.11.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. This is merely a requirement for transparency and accountability for Hugo administrators to keep notes of the decisions that they're making anyway. I believe I was the first Hugo administrator to start this tradition. I hope I will not be the last. I think it's a great idea for the business meeting to approve this amendment, so please do.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.11. Don't see anybody else wishing to speak. So I'm going to give you all just about 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, I do have, going to recognize Farah for an amendment.
Farah Mendelsohn, they. I think it should be detailed report rather than detailed summary.
Okay, so I believe you are making a motion to amend by striking the word summary and inserting report. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. Detailed summary doesn't make sense.
Okay. I do see a second. Okay. So the item before us is an amendment to E.11 to strike summary and insert report. I'm going to recommend a total debate time. Nope. Or wait, hold on. 5 minutes. I said it at 4. Okay, yeah. Total debate time is less than the default 5 minutes for amendments. So I'm going to recommend a total debate time of 2 minutes for this amendment. That would come out of the debate time for the rest of E.11. Is there any objection to my recommended debate time for this amendment of 2 minutes? Okay, seeing none, debate time for this is set at 2 minutes. And because this is an amendment to a item up for ratification, it does require a 2/3 vote of the body to suspend the rules and consider this. And so we've done this a couple times, but it's going to be clear. So our rules say that amendments to items up for ratification need to be submitted prior to the new business deadline, but that this can be suspended by a 2/3 vote. And so by making the amendment and getting the second, we are also going to now handle the motion to suspend the rules. And so this will require a 2/3 vote to take up this amendment. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on whether or not to take up the change to E.11. This would require a 2/3 majority to take up this amendment. I'm going to hold the vote open for another 20 seconds. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 63 in favor and 40 against, that is not a 2/3 majority. And so the motion to suspend the rules to take up the amendment to E.11 does not pass. And so we are not going to take up this amendment. And so we are back to E.11 as is in the agenda on page 35. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak. Okay, I do. Sorry. Okay, it looks like I have a couple of parliamentary inquiries, but they were relating to whether or not the amendment that we're not taking up was a greater or lesser change. So it wasn't relevant until we decided to do so. Okay, I'm going to recognize Linda Deneroff for a different amendment.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I can't seem to turn on my video. I think that sentence is pretty clunky, and I would just want to change it and shorten it to, these reports must include detailed information or detailed summary of any eligibility.
Okay, so
beginning with detailed summary, just leave it in.
Okay, so yeah, so the motion is to strike.
Must be accompanied by.
Yeah.
And then just say include.
Yeah, so it's to strike be accompanied by and to insert include so that it would read, these reports must include a detailed summary of any eligibility rulings, etc. Okay. We're going to do it in the proper order this time. Well, first, is there a second to this amendment? Okay, I do see a second. And so we're going to now do it in the proper order this time and decide whether we're going to do this before we even set debate. And so just as before, this is a late motion to amend an item up for ratification and therefore requires a suspension of the rules and a 2/3 vote to take up in the first place. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on whether to take up this amendment to E.11. And so this would require a 2/3 majority to pass. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 31 in favor and 63 against, that is not a 2/3 majority. And so the rules were not suspended and we will not take up that amendment to E.11. We are back to E.11 as is in your agenda on page 35. I do not see anybody else wishing to speak to E.11. I'm going to give you all about 10 or 15 seconds to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak to E.11. Okay, I don't see anybody else wishing to speak. And so we are going to move to a vote on E.11. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the ratification of E.11. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. Okay, with 102 in favor and 2 against, E.11 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this Worldcon. Okay, that brings us to E.12, Speculative Poetry Hugo Award on page 35 of our agenda. Debate time on this item has been set at 10 minutes. I am going to recognize Brian Garrison for a speech in favor. And I will then recognize Nicholas White for a speech against.
Hi, thank you, Mixed Chair. I'm Brian U. Garrison, he, him. I'm the current president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association. It was founded in 1978, which means we're reaching 50 years as an organization. Speculative poetry is not just a flash in the pan. With engagement for our Riesling Award has increased. As engagement for the Riesling Award increased, we had to cut back on the size of the anthology where we print finalists. In 2022, we gathered the past 20 years of growth. So in 2002, we had 42 poems nominated. 10 years later, in 2012, we had 105 poems nominated. In 2022, we had 180 poems nominated. So there is a strong interest in speculative poetry. Many of you may know that the Nebula Awards offered their first best poem just this year. Reviewing the votes for the Hugo process, there has been a number of voters participating in the process. So it was kind of right in the middle of the count of votes cast. So not as many people voting for poems as for best novels, but we are up there in the running of interest. Thank you. I yield.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.12. I have a high priority item. So I have a parliamentary inquiry about why the amendment references the 2029 business meeting. So it is generally our practice, though certainly not required, that especially for new Hugo Awards, we add what is called a sunset clause to these items, which basically means that we put it in the Constitution, but we add a clause that it needs to be re-ratified again at a future point. And that also that re-ratification will automatically happen. So in this case, should we pass E.12, then at the 2029 business meeting, the Speculative Poetry Hugo Award would come up for ratification again. And if it is not re-ratified at that time, then it would be removed from the Constitution. This has been the practice for, I mean, I know it was for best game, I believe for best series. It's not required by our rules, but has generally been the practice when we are adding new Hugo Awards, Hugo Award categories. Okay, I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech against the E.12, and then I am going to recognize Holly Lynn Walroth for a speech in favor.
Many thanks, Mixed Chairperson. I want to salute the energy of the poets who want to see the Hugos recognizing poetry. I think that's an entirely legitimate aspiration. However, I speak against for two reasons. The first one is a general point. The fact is that since 2016, 10 years ago, the number of Hugo categories has increased by almost 30% from 17 to 22. And the number of Hugo finalists, because we also went up from 5 to 6 per category, has increased by 55% from 85 to 132. And there comes a point, I think, when this meeting needs to decide precisely how much burden it's planning to place on future Worldcons. I think we need to be very clear that every decision that we make to create a new Hugo category creates new commitments, commitments that we're making on behalf of other people. And I think we should take that very, very seriously. The second point is specific to the best poem category. It has been trialed last year. It was trialed this year. The number of nominations, the participation at the nomination stage was not terribly good. It was along there with the 3 existing problem categories, the 2 best artist categories, which we spent ages trying to fix, the best editor long form category, which I think is probably beyond salvation. People are not that interested in it. And do we really want to be creating another Hugo category that is a low performance category? I urge people to think again and vote against ratification of this amendment. Thank you, Mixed Chairperson.
Okay, that was a speech against E.12. I'm going to recognize Holly Lynn Walrath for a speech in favor, and then I'm going to recognize Rafe Richards for a speech against.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. My name is Holly Lynn Walrath, she, they, and I'm one of the proposers of this amendment. Speculative poetry arguably is the first literature and the origin of most science fiction, fantasy, and horror genres, and thus predates genre fiction as we know it. Speculative poetry has been a part of the SFF community from the beginning, and to support the diverse number of poets writing in this form, as well as the growing ecosystem of magazines publishing this form, including our 39 magazine sponsors, we ask you to vote to make a Poetry Hugo permanent. I yield.
That was a speech in favor. Rafe Richards retracted his request to speech against. So I'm going to recognize Lisa Hertel for a speech against. And then I'm going to recognize Lynn Sargent for a speech in favor.
Unmute. There we go. Okay, that took a minute. So my problem with it is define poetry. I've seen things that I consider a perfectly prose paragraph labeled by the author as poetry. We try to leave as little as possible up to the discretion of the administrators and up to the discretion of the people who write things. So without a clear, easy definition of poetry that would be understandable by people who have never even taken advanced English classes, I can't see how this could be a Hugo. With YA, we made it not a Hugo, and I would be for that. Unfortunately, doing that would be a greater change and would have to restart the clock for this. So I unfortunately think we have to vote this down and rewrite it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech against E.12. I'm going to recognize Lynn Sargent, right? That's what I said. Yep, Lynn Sargent for a speech in favor. And then I'm going to recognize Sean Mead for a speech against.
Thank you, mixed speaker. I'm Lynn, pronouns they, she. I'm one of the proposers on this motion. I want to address the concern that Hugos are for the interests of Worldcon members. Like Holly, poetry has been a part of Worldcon programming since at least 1978. Poetry appears in magazines and novels alongside art, short fiction, related works, and more. Refusing to establish a Poetry Hugo, I think, would send a message that poetry does not belong in genre when all these other categories are represented at the Hugos. Voting last year in this category was strong, and I do think that there is a broad number of nominations, and that shows that poetry is diverse and that there are many poems worthy of recognition. I totally understand that poetry can be hard to define, but I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon, and we shouldn't be afraid to recognize categories of art that are difficult to define. Thank you so much. I urge everyone to vote in favor, and I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.12. I'm going to recognize Sean Mead for a speech against, and then I will recognize Jim Keller for a speech in favor.
Thank you. Sean Mead, he, him. This category is too niche for Hugo at the moment. Right now, you've got, that creates two problems. One, it further dilutes the Hugo Award value. As we previously addressed the explosion. Number two, we can't do a very good job of judging it. Of our nominations this year, almost 1,500 nominating ballots. We have a finalist got on this poetry categories list with 12. The best out of the finalists was 35. 35 out of 1,500, almost 1,488 nominating ballots. It's just too niche. We can't do a good job with it, and it'll further delete the Hugos. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech against E.12. I'm recognizing Jim Keller for a speech in favor, and then I will recognize Gray Anderson for a speech against.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jim Keller. Any pronouns are fine. Fandom is and needs to be a big tent. Hundreds of people nominated for this Hugo this year and last. Clearly, this is a category that matters to some people. So even if poetry is not your cup of tea, even if you would never vote in this category, please support keeping this Hugo out of respect for those of us who love and value speculative poetry. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.12. I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a speech against, and then I will recognize Marie Brennan for a speech in favor.
Thank you, mixed chair. Cliff Dunn. Two things come to mind. The first is that the Hugo creep problem, that is more and more categories being added, is a real thing, and I think we can see by way of the strong emotions expressed by proponents in favor of something they are truly passionate about, that were we to find ourselves down the line looking to get rid of this, the passions would run just as strong, and it would be emotionally difficult to get rid of it. Second, as to the nominations, I would point out, since we don't have all the stats from this year, obviously, with last year's stats, 5 of the 6 nominees made it onto the ballot with less than 20, and 4 of the 6 had 15 or fewer nominations. We are at the point where the long list is being filled out with a very large number of works that are very much in the tail. Most of the long list was, in fact, single-digit nominations, and I just don't think that's a good look. At a certain point, we end up, unfortunately, not having nominees that are getting onto the ballot more due to pot luck and having a handful of people who liked it than a broader sense of the community. Short story does have a similar distribution issue, and that's actually why we got rid of the requirement to be on 5% of the nominating ballots in a category. The difference is that short story has far, far more nominations coming in, and so that problem doesn't emerge there. So I don't think this is a great category. There are already a large number of Hugos, and I'm concerned that we will end up with some second class.
Okay. Thank you. We are out of time for speeches against E.12. Olav, how are we doing for time remaining for speeches in favor?
We have 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Okay. I'm going to recognize Marie Brennan for a speech in favor of E.12. And if there's still time, I will then recognize Tammy Coxon for a speech in favor.
Hi, thank you, Mixed Chair. I'm Marie Brennan, she, her. Last year in this meeting, I reported that an annual speculative poetry challenge I take part in drew 2.5 times as many participants as it had in previous years, and I'm glad to say that in 2026, that surge did not drop off. The Nebula category and the Special Hugo Awards have done an enormous amount already to build interest and engagement, which I believe will continue to build. We're getting both writers and readers saying, I was always intimidated by poetry, but I really enjoyed this. Since this category would have to be re-ratified by 2029 anyway, let's give people more of a chance to find out that poetry isn't actually that scary. Right now we have a healthy little sapling. Why not give it a chance to grow and see what kind of tree it becomes over the next few years? Thank you.
Okay, that was a speech in favor of E.12. Time for speeches against has elapsed. I'm going to recognize Tammy Coxon for a speech in favor. And then if there is still time remaining, I will recognize Kat Corbetti for a speech in favor.
Tammy Coxon, she, her. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, great. Sorry, grab my notes. I understand the objections raised by Nicholas as a fellow Hugo administrator, but I am actually in favor of ratifying the poem category. I recently developed a spreadsheet to track the viability of categories, and best poem performs quite well in terms of participation at voting. I think it has the possibility of being stronger at the nomination phase, and we now have tools to objectively assess that before the sunset clause comes up. To the question of defining a poem, I think we can trust Hugo voters in this regard, just as we do for best related work. There is a characteristic of poeminess that most people recognize as being different from the characteristic of storyness, which is a requirement for the four existing fiction categories.
That is time.
Okay, thank you. Time in favor for speeches against has now elapsed. And so we do still have 3 people in the pool to speak in favor and nobody wishing to speak against. I'm going to give you all a few more seconds to see if there is anybody else wishing to make any motion relating to E.12. Okay, I have both a motion to end debate and a motion to extend debate. I'm just going to go with the one that I saw first. Is there a second to the motion to end debate? And this would, to be clear, prevent the making of subsidiary amendments as well as, I mean, debate time has elapsed, but okay. I see several seconds. While I believe there will be objections, I just want to test and see that. Is there any objection to ending debate and moving to a vote on E.12? Okay, I do see an objection. And so we will move to a vote on the motion to end debate. So the motion to end debate requires a 2/3 vote. And so as a reminder, this not just ends debate, which debate time has expired, but it also closes the making of additional amendments. And this requires a 2/3 majority. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the motion to end debate on E.12. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 89 in favor and 14 against, the motion to end debate passes. And so we will now move to a vote on the adoption of E.12. And so once Adam is ready, we can go ahead and open the vote on the adoption of E.12. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 73 in favor and 41 against, E.12 passes and will be added to the Constitution at the end of this Worldcon and will be brought up for re-ratification at the 2029 Worldcon. Okay, that brings us to E.13, Retire NASFIC, which is on page 36 of your agenda. Debate time on this has been set at 10 minutes. So if there's anyone wishing to speak to E.13, Retire NASFIC, they can submit a request to do so. Okay, I'm going to recognize Lisa Hertel for a speech in favor of E.13.
Yeah, that takes a bit. So I was the maker of this motion. Basically, NASFIC is NASFIC has not been successful the past couple of decades. I've talked to chairs of NASFIC. I've talked to creators of NASFIC. It's an idea whose time has unfortunately passed. And there's no reason to burden WSFS with the administration of this convention. If somebody wants to run a convention opposite or as an alternative to Worldcon and advertise it at Worldcon, they are certainly free to do so. But let's get this off of WSFS's plate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.13. Oh, there we go. I'm going to recognize Sean Mead for a speech against, and then Kayla Allen for a speech in favor.
Sean Mead. Yeah, I'm against this. I think NASFIC's important. I think if we're not doing this, it's not going to happen. I think everybody realizes that it's just going to die. It's important when it's out. I've certainly enjoyed several myself, and I think it helps maintain fandom, which right now is in a perilous condition. I think it helps maintain it, and it'll be a good bridge for those years at the Worldcons outside the U.S. and that we need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that was a speech against E.13. I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen for a speech in favor, and then I will recognize Alex Von Thorn for a speech against.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I'm somewhat reluctant to speak in favor of this because it would appear that my support to a side is the kiss of death to many of the motions here. But notwithstanding that the NASFIC in Detroit, organized by my colleague, Ms. Coxon, was one of the best conventions I ever attended, and I enjoyed it greatly. And notwithstanding that some bozo named Kevin Stanley was fan guest of honor at a NASFIC in the past, I do have to agree that we have reached the end of the road for this. Lack of interest, truthfully. It's really a very difficult convention to organize. You don't have much to pull on. People are going to go to Worldcon or not, but they just don't really see, most of them are not seeing a need to attend a NASFIC. And so just as we retired, or we're in the process of retiring WesterCon because its time has passed, I believe it's time to retire NASFIC because its time has passed. I yield.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.13. I'm going to recognize Alex Von Thorn for a speech against, and then Brian Nisbet for a speech in favor. Alex Von Thorn, if you can please raise the hand in Zoom so that we can request you unmute and speak.
Sorry, hold on.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay.
If you can go ahead and speak.
Sorry, I'm visually impaired, so I don't see all the controls. So thank you, Mixed Chair. This debate's been going on for a while. I've been to great NASFICs and I've been to some that have been poorly organized. But the one argument that I think will matter to this audience, as opposed to people who attend them, is that if we have a U.S. with the current mishigas going on in the U.S., I want to see fewer U.S. Worldcons for a while, and over time, what's going to happen is there's going to be U.S. Worldcons bidding against non-U.S. Worldcons, and if we have a NASFIC, we have an alternative that can bring people together. And if we don't, some voters will vote for a U.S. Worldcon and take it away from a good non-U.S. site, and I would prefer that to not happen. So I think NASFIC provides a useful role to help bring the Worldcon community together, as it always has, for people who can't always afford to travel.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a speech against E.13. I have a parliamentary inquiry from Patrick Malloy asking if E.13 is adopted, will the Mark Protection Committee cease registering the NASFIC service mark? So in general, the MPC will presumably use their best judgment as to how to protect WSFS's marks. In addition, the original motion that was submitted to Seattle last year included language about retiring the service marks, and the business meeting specifically chose to amend that motion and strike that paragraph to allow the MPC to exercise their best judgment regarding those marks. And so it would continue to be in the hands of the MPC to determine the best course of action related to those marks. Okay, I'm going to recognize Brian Nisbet for a speech in favor. I don't currently have any other speeches against, and so after that, I will recognize Colin Harris for a speech in favor if there's no other speeches against.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Brian Nisbet, he, him. So if North America, if the US wants to run an annual convention or an intermittent convention, they should do so. Europe does this. It travels around the continent, happens every year. It's Worldcon run by the SFS. But if they want to do this, they should, but it doesn't need to be part of WSFS. The W is world. So there should be no addition. The same way we rejected the notion of an Asian convention there to be under the auspices of WSFS, this is the moment to remove the NASFIC from it as well. And if it wanted, it will happen. But if not, then not. And certainly either way, it shouldn't be WSFS running it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, real quick, Olav, can we get a time check?
There are 2 minutes and 20 seconds remaining for speeches in favor. There are 3 minutes and 30 seconds for speeches against.
Thank you. Okay. There's still no one wishing to speak against, and so I'm going to recognize Colin Harris for a speech in favor, and then I would recognize Alan Bond for another speech in favor.
So Brian sort of slightly beat me to it and made many of the points I was going to. I think there was a time, the history of Worldcon started in the US. For decades, the event was in the US, the majority of years with occasional travels. And at that time, I think a NASFIC made sense. I think we have a much better global balance now. I think that was happening even prior to the current political situation in the US. And I think it has made the NASFIC anomalous. I think we need, as Brian says, to just keep the W in Worldcon now and continue that process of being more equitable and more global. Thank you. I yield.
Okay. Thank you. That was a speech in favor. I still don't have anybody else wishing to speak against, and so I'm going to recognize Alan Bond for a speech in favor, and then Gary Blogg for a speech in favor if there is still time remaining.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I speak for this because I saw what came right before this amendment, and that was an amendment to create additional regional conventions managed by WSFS in other parts of the world. And I think that the administering of regional conventions does not belong to WSFS, and I think that NASFIC has, as a result, become a liability for WSFS because it shows a preference to one region over others. And I think we need to be clear that we support all regions equally, and that includes getting rid of the NASFIC.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor. I'm going to recognize Gary Blogg for a speech in favor. We still don't have any speeches against, and so if there's time remaining, I will recognize Ron Oakes for a speech in favor. I'm recognizing Gary Blogg, and so we can ask him to unmute.
Gary Blogg. Sadly, we will have two international, Brisbane and Dublin, should they both win the 28 and 29 Worldcons. There's absolutely no interest in wanting to run NASFICs those years. I haven't heard anything by anybody who wants to even think about that. So even if this wasn't up, I doubt if anybody would be running it. So we wouldn't even have these conventions. I doubt if we would have any decent, good conventions, even if we weren't doing this. So I think sadly, nobody wants, and here in the US, regionals are dying left, right, and center. And I just don't think we need to have this anymore, sadly. I had good times at many of the NASFICs, but sadly, like everybody else has been saying, its time has come. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.13. Olav, how much time do we have remaining for speeches in favor?
We have 25 seconds.
Okay, we do have somebody wishing to speak against, so I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a speech against E.13, and then to Ron Oakes for a speech in favor.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. My only comment is to stand as a correction to what the previous speaker said, and that is that I have heard that there is a group potentially interested in hosting a 2028 NASFIC in Cleveland.
Okay, thank you. So that was a speech against E.13. I'm going to recognize Ron Oakes for a speech in favor. And I believe Olav said there is 25 seconds remaining for speeches in favor.
Okay, quickly. Fandom actually is quite strong. It's just not active, at least in the United States, in the traditional literary fan space. And I think we need to concentrate our energy where it is strongest, which is Worldcon. And continuing NASFIC will dilute that strength. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor. Olav, where does that put us on speeches in favor? Olav, how much
Sorry,
time is remaining?
I thought I'd unmuted.
You're good.
We have 10 seconds remaining.
Okay, we have 10 seconds. Okay. I'm going to recognize Chris Rose for a 10-second speech in favor.
Mixed Chair, nothing in this prevents anyone running an NASFIC. It just simply takes it away from makes it no longer required by WSFS.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of E.13. I do not have anybody else wishing to speak. So I'm going to give you all about 10 or 15 seconds to see if there is anybody else wishing to speak or make a motion. I do have a motion to end debate, but if there is nobody else wishing to speak, there is no need to move to a vote. Okay. I do have a speech in favor that just popped in, but at this point, substantive. I mean, I think there's maybe 3 seconds remaining for speeches in favor, so I'm going to say that time for speeches in favor has expired. I'm going to give you all just a few more moments to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak or make a motion relating to E.13. Okay, seeing none, we can move to a vote on the adoption of E.13. And so we can go ahead and open the vote. We can go ahead and close the vote. With 98 in favor and 8 against, E.13 passes and will be added or mostly removed from the Constitution at the end of this year's Worldcon. Okay, we are at 11:44 p.m. Pacific time, and as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, at the prior meeting, we postponed F.8 definitely to be taken up not later than 11:45 p.m. Pacific time due to the availability of the maker of that motion. And so we are going to jump to F.8, purposeful proportionality, which is on page 49 of your agenda. And I'm going to find my notes about where I set debate time for this. One moment. Where did it go? There it is. Okay. We have set debate time on this at 10 minutes. And so I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor of F.8.
Thank you, mixed chairperson, and thank you particularly to the meeting for allowing me to bring this to the table today. We have a problem. Our problem is that our current method of electing committees makes it possible that a sufficiently well-organized faction within the group could take every single seat that is up for election. It's possible to see that somebody who actually had slightly less than half of the vote of the body could win all 3 seats that were up for the MPC. Arguably, this happened last year. Arguably, what happened was that one of the candidates for the MPC endorsed 2 others, and both of those other 2 got elected. And I don't think it's a big secret that the candidate who endorsed the other 2 successful candidates was in fact me. So I think it would be better, particularly given the more political role that we're now giving to the MPC, given the resolutions that were passed at the last meeting and the amendments that are likely to go through in the next one. I think we have to recognise that the MPC becomes a more political body, and that elections from this meeting to committees of the of WSFS are in a sense more political than they had been in the past, and we must move to a more proportional system. This may look complicated in the way it's put in the rules. In fact, this is exactly the system that is used in many real life situations for municipal elections in jurisdictions as varied as Scotland, Malta, New Zealand, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Portland, Oregon, and most crucially, for the Senate in Australia, where the Worldcon after next will likely be held, and for all elections in Ireland, where the Worldcon after that is likely to be held. So in fact, we're going to be punting a system to people who already know how to operate it. I think this will be a significant improvement. It will add to the credibility of our internal processes by ensuring that all voices have a chance at representation, and it makes us less vulnerable to bad actors. So I'm very happy to answer questions about this, because I'm sure that there will be, but I really hope that the meeting will support this amendment. Thank you very much.
Okay. I believe I have a couple parliamentary inquiries. So I'm going to recognize Linda Deneroff for a parliamentary inquiry or request for information, because I'm not clear on what the question is.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I read through this entire proposal, and I truly do not understand what the difference is between the way we do things now and what this purposeful proportionality is proposing. Is there a concrete example of the way, and maybe it needs to be visual for me, but I just don't understand what the difference is. We use IRV as it is to do these things, and I don't understand what this proposal is. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was essentially a request for information. I mean, I can answer this question, but I can't answer it as well as Nicholas White. And really, my answer would be to tell everybody to go watch the CGP Grey videos about voting systems, because that's how I learned it. So I'm going to go ahead and direct Nicholas White to answer this. I'm going to request that your answer just be a brief summary of the fundamental philosophical difference between instant runoff voting and single transferable vote, rather than getting into the specific numbers of it, if that makes sense. But I will recognize Nicholas White to answer that question.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. My answer comes in 2 parts, both very brief. The first part is to directly respond to Linda's question. The question is, do you have an election result that represents a proportional reflection of how people vote? or do you have a majority voting several times over to elect people from that majority? And second part of my answer, very, very practically, last year I endorsed Alan Bond and Chris Rose, both of whom got elected to the MPC. Under the system that I'm proposing, one of them would not have got elected, and Bruce Farr would have been elected because he had the support of a sufficient proportion of the rest of the voting body.
Okay, thank you. We had another parliamentary inquiry from Gray Anderson, but from what I could tell, it was a snarky comment and therefore dilatory, and so out of order. If your question was substantive, please resubmit it and I will recognize you. Okay, we have had a speech in favor. I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen for, I believe, a speech against, but it may actually be a request for information. I'm not clear.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Yeah, I believe it is a request for information. I just didn't know how to phrase it, and I was prepared to yield some time against for an answer from Mr. White. How would this apply to the Hugo Awards, which are nominally for a single winner, but when instant runoff voting produces a tie, we have always given multiple awards at that level? And I'm going to go ahead and take that since requests of information are directed to the chair. So as the member pointed out, so the text says in an election to determine a single winner, and basically says we use IRV, and that in an election to determine multiple winners, we use this process. I think that fundamentally, while a tie in Hugo Award voting may result in multiple winners, the election is to determine a single winner. And there is a situation in which you can end up with multiple winners, but the election is to determine a single winner. And so this section would not apply to the Hugo Awards. I would also say that it is always the case that the opinions of the presiding officer of the business meeting are not binding upon the Hugo Award subcommittee. They are the ones who administer the Hugo Awards. And so fundamentally, it would be up to the interpretation and discretion of the Hugo Award administrator to determine if they felt that actually this new language applied to the Hugo Awards. But I do find it rather unlikely that that would happen. Okay, that was a request for information. And so I'm going to recognize Sean Mead for a speech against, and then I'm going to recognize Warren Buff for a speech in favor.
Thank you. Sean Mead. I'm speaking against this because of the way it's written. I think WFSS has had enough problems over the years with things that are in at least ambiguously written, and this thing is not clear. It does not. It's just a mess. I just see it generating more problems than help. I'm not discussing the intent, but the execution is just not very workable, I think, as a matter of writing. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to recognize Warren Buff for a speech in favor, and then I'm going to recognize Laura Miller for a speech against.
Thank you, Mixed Chairperson. I don't believe my video is working, so I'm just going to come through on audio. So when we discussed proposing this, we realized that it was not going to be something that could be described in as few words as the transferable vote system, the instant runoff vote system we use for the Hugos is currently. It does take a longer description, and we went through several iterations to get this into something that people coming at it from a language-based instruction background and from a computer-based instruction background could both translate into a process. It's a complicated system to describe, but the fundamental purpose behind it is clear. The purpose is to protect the interests of a strong minority within the electorate, such that in a typical 3-person MPC election, if more than a quarter of the voters want a candidate, they will get that candidate. Even a slight majority couldn't stop them from that. So our goal here was to protect strong minorities while still having a clear process for how a majority can be formed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor. It looks like Laura Miller has retracted the request to speak against. So I'm going to recognize Kayla Allen for an amendment.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. And I thank the chair for their explanation before. But in order to make it so that people don't get confused like I do, I move to amend by inserting after the phrase "to select a single winner," the words including the Hugo Awards. And I think maybe I should say Hugo Awards final ballot. I don't know if that last bit is necessary. I will leave it up to you, I guess.
I mean, you know, I love deciding what the meaning of the intent of people's amendments is.
Well,
no, I know. Sorry, that was yeah. I think based on what you stated, your intent is, if you're wanting to clear up any confusion, that you would want to clarify in an election to determine a single winner, including the the final ballot of the Hugo Awards, I think is probably the better way to say it. Okay, so is that consistent? So in an election to determine a single winner, including the final ballot of the Hugo Awards, is that the intent of your amendment?
Yes, that is the intention. There is no reason to get that involved in the nomination process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I make that motion, and thank you, Mixed Chair.
Okay, is there a second to this motion? Okay, I do see several seconds. Okay, I have a parliamentary inquiry about if 6.4.2 would affect E pluribus Hugo, which is our nominations process for the Hugo Awards. Once again, clarifying that I am not a Hugo Award administrator and my opinions as the presiding officer are not binding on them. I would say no, it doesn't. The Hugo Award nomination process is not an election to determine multiple winners. It's a nomination process. And also in the general, I mean, this is D&D, but you know, the whole thing about specificity beating generality, we clearly outline what the process is for Hugo nominations, Hugo Award nominations in the Constitution. And so it's very clear that that's what the process is. And that 6.4.2 is not applying to that. Okay. The item in front of us now is the amendment to F.8 to insert including the final ballot of the Hugo Awards after to determine a single winner, so that it would read in an election to determine a single winner, including the final ballot of the Hugo Awards. I'm going to ask the body, is there any objection to adopting this amendment to F.8? Okay, I do see an objection. I see several. Thank you. Okay. Olaf, how much total time do we have remaining on F.8?
We have 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Okay. I am going to recommend that we set debate time for this amendment at 2 total minutes, not to be taken out of the remaining time for F.8. Is there any objection? Okay, so if that is an objection to the time, I'm going to lower your hand and ask you to re-raise it because I did not see when that popped up. Okay, is there any objection to setting the debate time for the amendment to F.8 to 2 total minutes, not to be taken out of the total debate time for F.8? If there's any objection to that debate time, please raise the hand. Okay, seeing none, debate time on the amendment to F.8 is set at 2 total minutes. Kayla, if you wish to speak further to your amendment, can you please raise the hand? Otherwise, I will move to anybody else wishing to speak if they wish to. Okay, I will recognize Kayla Allen to speak to her amendment.
Thank you, Mixed Chair Kayla Allen. Just to make it clear, I'm almost certain that this is the intent. This is what we wanted to do. So we might as well encode it here, because if somebody like me can get confused over, a bunch of other people will as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of the amendment. I'm going to recognize Alan Fleming for a speech against the amendment.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I am not certain. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I cannot see how this amendment would interface with section 3.1.1.3.1.2 in the section of the Constitution regarding Hugo Awards and specifying their voting. I don't think that we should take this amendment without further consideration of how the relevant parts of the Constitution interact with each other. I yield.
Thank you. That was a speech against the amendment. I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor, but first I'm going to answer a point of order. So Stephen Cooper has made a point of order about a 2/3 vote to take up an amendment. So the requirement for a 2/3 vote to take up an amendment is specifically regarding items that are up for ratification, that have already had their first passage, and that this is the meeting taking up their second passage. And I apologize if I was not clear, but we do still have a couple items in the E section that need to be taken up. This is an item in the F section. This is a new constitutional change. It has not had first passage. We jumped ahead because at the preliminary meeting, we set a specific time to take this item up due to the availability of the maker. So we have hopped ahead to the new constitutional changes section, and so amendments do not require prior notice or a 2/3 vote if there is no prior notice. And so the amendment is in order. Okay. I am going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech in favor of the amendment.
Thank you, ex-chairperson, and thank you to Kayla Allen for providing this clarifying wording. I completely support it. There's no intention for this this proposal to affect the calculation of the Hugo Award winners or indeed of the Hugo Award ballot. I think it's I totally agree with the chair's suggestion that these things are adequately spelled out elsewhere in the Constitution. So I support the amendment, and I hope that other people will as well.
Thank you. That was a speech in favor of the amendment. I do not currently see anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment. I'm going to give you all just a few seconds to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment, and if not, we will move to a vote on the amendment to F.8. Okay. I am not seeing anybody else wishing to speak, and so what is before us is a vote on the amendment to F.8 to insert including the final ballot of the Hugo Awards after to determine a single winner, so that it would read in an election to determine a single winner, including the final ballot of the Hugo Awards. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on the amendment to F.8. We can go ahead and close the vote. With 69 in favor and 21 against, the amendment passes. And so the text of including the final ballot of the Hugo Awards has been added to the amendment, has been added to F.8. And so we are back to discussion on F.8 as amended. Okay, I'm going to recognize Dave Wallace for a speech in favor. And then I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a motion.
There we go. Yes. Okay. Dave Wallace, he, him. And yes, I believe that this overall proposal addresses a weakness in our balloting for multiple committee positions that is very similar to the kind of weakness that was exposed by the puppies in our Hugo nomination system back in 2015. We had to address that in a reactive way. I think it is very important to address this in a prospective way. And I've been aware of the general concern here ever since I was a freshman in college when I analyzed the rules for our student council, which was using
That
this
is time.
same kind of rank batting and found that.
Thank you. Okay. Time for speeches in favor has expired. Okay. I'm going to recognize Gray Anderson for a motion.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. I move to amend 6.4.2 to read, and this is just a subportion of it, obviously, multiple winners, except that the process of determining nominations for the Hugo Award final ballot.
Okay. I'm going to suggest that you don't want your that you said. So yeah, just
Correct.
except for the process of determining nomination. Okay, so your motion is to insert except for the process of determining nominations for the Hugo Award final ballot after multiple winners. Okay, is there a second for the amendment? Okay, I do see a second. Okay, so what is before us is a new amendment to F.8 to insert after determine multiple winners, except for the process of determining nominations for the Hugo Award final ballot. I know this is going to come up. Gray, are you okay with it saying the final ballot of the Hugo Awards like the first change we made?
That's fine.
Okay. Okay. So the motion is to amend by inserting after multiple winners, except for the process of determining nominations for the final ballot of the Hugo Awards. Okay. I have a high priority item. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna recognize SDS for a parliamentary inquiry. We can ask SDS to unmute. Thank you. Okay, we can see and hear you. Okay, sorry, I thought we could hear you. We can only hear your background noise. Can you move closer to the microphone? Okay. I have another high priority item. Okay, well, it's not actually a high priority item, it's an amendment. Second order amendments are not normally in order. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Jesse, I have the text of SDS's parliamentary inquiry from the Lumi. I can just read it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, the parliamentary inquiry was, does this conflict with Article 3, Hugo Award Section 3.1 Introduction section of the selection of the Hugo Award shall be made as provided in this article, which does not mention this other article?
Okay, yeah. So the question is, Section 3.1 states, selection of the Hugo Awards shall be made as provided in this article. F.8 is amending Section 6 or Article 6 rather, which is not Article 3. I would say that a clarification to the wording of F.8 that I would say F.8 already does not apply to the Hugo Awards because we specify that the Hugo Awards are administered by Article 3. However, the addition of the wording extra specifying that it doesn't apply to the Hugo Awards does not conflict with 3.1, and so does not bring the Constitution out of line with itself. But the member is correct that 3.1 says that the selection of the Hugo Awards shall be made as provided in this article, referring to Article 3, and that the changes we are making are to Article 6. Okay. It looks like, okay, I'm just reviewing because the state of what is in front of me has changed. Okay. There is, okay, I'm going to recognize Tammy Coxon for a motion.
Hello, Mixed Chair, Tammy Coxon, she, her. I would like to move to refer this to committee. Wordsmithing in the meeting rarely works out well. I think if we can take a week to come up with a clean text that addresses people's changes, people's concerns and ambiguities, we can come back next week with a clean amendment by substitution and proceed that way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that is a motion to refer F.8 and the Gray Anderson amendment to F.8 to committee to report back to the next session. I do see several seconds, and so it has been moved and seconded to refer this item to committee. Tammy Coxon, would you be willing to chair such a committee were it to be formed?
Yes, I can do that. I'll rope Nicholas in as well, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I presumed you wouldn't be doing it on your own, but
yeah.
Person who said the words, you get the honor.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is to refer to a committee to be chaired by Tammy Coxon, and then membership of the committee following our normal process. Should it be formed is, I'll ask who wants to be on it and forward that information along as appropriate. Okay. We're going to see. Oh, nope, I immediately have a speech against the referral, so there's definitely an objection to referring it to committee. Okay, I am going to recommend a debate time of 2 total minutes for the motion to refer, not to be taken out of the underlying time for F.8. Is there any objection to the recommended debate time of 2 total minutes for this motion to refer? So you can raise the hand in Zoom. Okay, seeing none, the debate time on this motion to refer to committee is set to 2 total minutes. Okay. I think Tammy has already essentially spoken in favor of the referral. And so I'm going to recognize, okay, sorry, I'm going to clarify to the speaker pool moderators that they can put request to speak regarding the referral into the third order folder. Since we are on a third order motion. Thank you. Okay. I am going to recognize Kayla Allen for a speech against referral.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Kayla Allen. I normally defer to all of these complaints about wordsmithing on the fly, but I think this may be the last one. I can't see anything further to niggle it on, and so I think we could just go ahead and move on with this, and therefore I'm opposed to referring to committee.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against referring to committee. I have a point of order, which is essentially a request for the orders of the day. So I have a point of order from Judy Bemis regarding the Mark Protection Committee election and that it was supposed to go live at noon. So I want to clarify that I have not announced as the presiding officer at the meeting a time for the Mark Protection election to happen. So there is not an order of the day regarding the Mark Protection Committee election. There is language on the website clarifying when we expect the election to go live so that when people saw those words on the website, they were not confused about when they should expect the election to go live. However, fundamentally, the election will open up basically after this meeting, and it will be open for 48 hours. So there is no concern about the timing of the election, and there is not an order of the day regarding the Mark Protection Committee election. And so the point of order is not well taken. Okay, we have had a speech in favor and a speech against the motion to refer F.8 and the amendment by Gray Anderson to F.8 to committee. And so I'm going to recognize Jack Foy for a speech in favor. Jack Foy, if you can raise the hand in Zoom and we can get you, request that you unmute. Oh, I don't see, there we go, thank you.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. You are very muffled with a lot of background noise.
Oh dear, I don't have any background noise here, so that's probably a bandwidth issue. I believe that this motion is well considered. I believe referring it to committee gives us the opportunity to clarify it in a way that we can adequately explain the intent and mechanism behind it to the body.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech in favor of the motion to refer to committee. I'm going to recognize Warren Buff for a speech against the motion to refer. And then I'm going to recognize Kat Corbetti for a speech in favor, depending on where we are on time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Warren Buff, he, him. I'm opposed to referring to committee. This was set to today to allow the primary maker to participate in the debate, which would not be possible on a later date. Therefore, I would vastly prefer that we go ahead and deal with the amendment now. I don't believe that the amendment makes so substantial a change that it needs to be referred to committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a speech against referral. Olaf, where are we on time?
We have 20 seconds remaining in favor. We have 20 seconds remaining against.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Kat Corbetti for speech in favor of referral, and then I'm going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech against referral.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Kat Corbetti, she, her. It is very clear that this clause is confusing to the body, and we do need to refine it in order to pass it. Otherwise, it risks failing. So if people want this to pass, let's figure out the best way to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do have a request for a report on the speaker pool. Here's what we have. Okay. Regarding speeches related to the motion to refer to committee, we have a total of 2 speeches against and 1 speech in favor. On the motion to amend F.8, we have, and people haven't, I just want to clarify, people generally haven't been adding to the queue since we started the motion to refer, but this is sort of where things stood when we took up the motion to refer. We have somebody wishing to speak against the amendment, and we have an amendment to the amendment, which would be out of order, but it's in there. We do not have anybody wishing to speak against the underlying F.8. We have 3 people wishing to speak in favor to the underlying F.8. That is the state. That is the current state of the speaker pool. Okay. I am going to recognize Nicholas White for a speech against the referral to committee. And then I will be recognizing Alan Bond.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. I think it's really straightforward. It's a question of 15 words that are proposed to be added to the amendment, to the resolution, that is. I think we can decide whether or not to add those tonight, right now, and I think we should just go ahead and do it. So please, let's not defer any further. Let's just go ahead.
I'm muted. I don't know how that happened. Sorry, y'all. Okay. That was a speech against referral. I'm going to recognize Alan Bond for a speech in favor of referral. And then I think we still have a little bit of time, and so I will then recognize Ron Oakes for a speech against referral.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to retract my request.
Okay. I'm going to recognize Ron Oakes for a speech against referral.
Ron Hoxie, as others have said, we should just get this done. This is a simple change. Let's get it done. Let's vote on the underlying amendment, or the underlying amendment. Let's vote on the underlying proposition and move on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't. Okay, I do have somebody wishing to speak in favor, so I'm going to recognize John Coxon for a speech in favor of referral.
John Coxon, he, him. I just want, you're going to have to, yeah. I just wanted to say that people are making the assumption that there won't be further amendments after this one that might need considering. So given that there might very well be, and there's that happening in the Discord at the moment, referring to committee might save us all a lot of time on this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that was a speech in favor of referral. Olav, how are we doing on time?
We are out of time.
Okay, we are out of time for speeches regarding referral. I'm going to give you all just a few seconds to see if there's a high priority need to speak, but I'm largely assuming that if you needed to make a point of order, you've had ample time to do so. Okay, so before we move to a vote, I'm going to make sure we're all clear on where we are. So the item currently before us, we had F.8, which is a new constitutional change. An amendment was made to F.8 by Kayla Allen. That amendment passed, and so F.8 was amended. Gray Anderson then made another amendment to F.8 to do something similar to what Kayla Allen did. There was then a motion to refer that amendment and F.8 to committee to handle the amendment made by Gray Anderson and any other changes that might need to be made to F.8. And Tammy Coxon said that she is willing to chair such a committee. And so the question currently in front of us is whether or not we are referring F.8 and the Gray Anderson amendment to F.8 to committee to report back to the next session on August 1st. Okay. The motion to refer to committee requires a majority vote to pass. And so we can go ahead and open the vote on whether or not to refer F.8 to committee. Okay, I'm going to hold the vote open for about 15 more seconds. Okay, we can go ahead and close the vote. With 58 in favor and 37 against, the motion to refer to committee passes. And so F.8 and the Gray Anderson amendment is referred to committee, which will be chaired by Tammy Coxon and brought to the next session to report back. Anyone interested in serving, and so as the maker of the amendment, Gray Anderson will automatically be added to that committee, and Nicholas White and Warren Buffs as the proposers of the original F.8 will also automatically be added to that committee. And anybody else wishing to be added to that committee should email bm-committee@lacon.org, which is an email that exists. That was not clear at the last meeting, but we've confirmed it exists. So you can and we will put this in the notices channel in the Discord. You can email bm-committee@lacon.org. You should do so by end of day today so that the committee has time to accomplish its work. Okay, so F.8 has been referred to committee. We are at 5 minutes prior to our scheduled time to end. I would love, if possible, to get through oh no, sorry. I've forgotten where we are in the schedule. My whole issue with E.11 was around the bio break, but we've handled it. That's fine. Okay. So given where we are, I think it makes sense to call it for today. So the remaining ratifications that we still have are E14 and E15, unnecessary PII and end the false binary. And so those will come up at the next meeting, and then we'll we'll probably actually start with the report from F.8 just to keep things clear. The committee we just formed, and then we'll handle the remaining ratifications, and then we'll move into the rest of our new constitutional changes. Okay. And also I will be announcing the membership of the D.5 committee, which I was not able to figure out who that would be today. So as announced at the preliminary business meeting, this is the meeting where we handle the election of the Mark Protection Committee. Alana, if you are able to get the slide up, the people who have accepted nomination. I know you're gonna have to like jump forward a little bit, I think. Okay, actually, if you can, you're gonna have to stop the screen share and restart it because that slide has been edited, or stop the slideshow and restart it rather. And then if we can actually start on the MPC voting slide. Okay, I have a parliamentary inquiry about what I meant by end of day. Yes, I mean end of day Pacific time, so that's in approximately what, 9.5 hours from now, but also like if I see your request to be on the committee in my email in the morning, I will go ahead and forward it on to Tammy. This is not a situation where strict cutoffs are a huge deal. I've been informed 11.5 hours. Right, because I'm in Central Time. Whatever, midnight in Pacific, whenever that is. Okay. Alana, are you able to get the slideshow back up with the slide about the MPC voting?
Yeah, working on it. 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries. I'm also realizing that I can start talking even if it's not up there. Okay. So the way that balloting for the Mark Protection Committee is going to work this year is that you will go into the LAcon V member portal and you will click the business meeting card. That is the exact same way that you got here to Lumi. So you all should know hopefully how to do that. In the business meeting card, there is now a section regarding the Mark Protection Committee election. And there is a button that either says or will say vote in the MPC election, and you will click that button and it will take you to voting in the MPC election. The election will be open until noon on Pacific time on Tuesday, July 28th. So approximately 48 hours to vote in the election. The people who have responded, who have accepted their nomination for the MPC, so the candidates for the MPC are Alana Vincent, Andrew January, Arturo Serrano, Gary Blogg, Joni Dashoff, Judy Bemis, Linda Ross Mansfield, Rosanna Pendlebury, Todd Dashoff, and Warren Buff. There are statements in the Mark Protection Committee channel in the Discord from folks about why they wish to be elected to the Mark Protection Committee. And so you can review those there. If there are any candidates who have accepted their nomination and have not yet submitted a statement, they can still do so by emailing bm-candidate@lacon.org, and we will get that up in the Discord as soon as possible. Okay, so that is, and then we will announce the results of the Mark Protection Committee election at the next meeting. Okay, so that is the deal on the MPC election. And I am going to wait to see if my staff are going to yell at me about any other announcements that I need to give before the end of the meeting. I don't see any of my staff typing in the chat and nobody's hopping into the voice chat to yell at me. So I don't think nope, somebody's typing. What have I forgotten? Um, okay, we're fine on that. Okay. Is there anything else? Okay. I think we're good for today's meeting. So as a reminder of where things stand, at the next meeting, we will be announcing the results of the MPC election, announcing who's on the D.5 committee, hearing back from the F.8 committee. And if you want to be on that committee, you should let us know by emailing bm-committee prior to the end of today. We will be handling the ratifications or not of E.14 and E.15. And then we will be jumping into the rest of the new constitutional changes. We do also have a late resolution regarding a Hugo eligibility extension. And so those get added to the end of the agenda. And so we'll hopefully also take that up at the next meeting. So with no further announcements to handle, I am going to adjourn this meeting and I will see you all at our next meeting on August 1st. Thank you all.